Welcome to Mind What Matters, the show where data security meets real talk. We're here to unpack the big stories, the happenings and things going on in the cybersecurity industry, and hopefully we'll do it with a little dash of fun. So whether you're trying to protect the data across your enterprise, justify it in the boardroom, or protect it across your social enterprise, whatever that is, we're here to help you mind what matters. My name is Samuel Hill, and I'm joined, as always, by Landon Brown, the head elf here at the North Pole of the Mind What Matters podcast. Looking forward to the holiday season as well. But Landon, how are you today?
I'm fantastic, Sam. Happy holidays. I think being the head elf here at Mind is a lot of responsibility, so I appreciate the recognition.
Yes, absolutely. A prime position, one that we all count on every single year. So Landon, let's start off our show as we do every single week. Landon, what is on your mind?
It's funny you ask, Sam, because there's something that I'm noticing more and more every year. And it leads me to a question. And that question is, when on earth did paying other people to put up your Christmas lights become a booming industry? I'm seeing a massive amount of competition. The amount of business cards that I have stacked in the fold of my door every day when I come home from work about we will hang your Christmas lights and we'll take them down is absurd. At what point did this become a booming competitive industry, Sam?
I'll tell you the point it was for me. I hung my Christmas lights myself this year before the snows hit. And my wife encouraged me to do that because she knows my aversion to being on a ladder. We were doing some remodeling. We were painting a large room with a very tall ceiling, and the ladder slid out from under me. And I took maybe a 10, 15 foot fall to the ground.
Whoa.
And ladders and me are not close friends anymore. So I could understand the drive to maybe have somebody else who's more confident in their ladder skills put lights up. Do they also offer to store your Christmas lights for you?
I haven't heard that one, but what I will say is I did spend some time in the military, and even after all of that time, my fear of heights never went away. So I am a secret considerer of paying someone to put my Christmas lights on, as much as I will rag on the idea.
I've thought about it too, like with like my neighbors and our friends that are in my neighborhood here. If we rented one of those like scissor lifts or one of those like boom arm trucks from the local rental company, maybe we can get all of our houses in an afternoon and we all split the cost of that rental to get our lights up. We've thought about that. We haven't done it yet, but it's definitely been a consideration.
I've heard too many horror stories of boom accidents, Sam. And so I'm going to stay back from that one, but I'll pay you to do it, Sam.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll be right over. Yeah, I think at the going rate now, whatever teenagers are charging to climb ladders and hang lights, you're gonna
with no insurance.
Yeah, exactly. We'll figure it out. Well, that's what's on my mind as well. It is officially the start of the holiday season, and I'm hoping that everybody has some joyous festivities planned. They get together with friends and loved ones and people they really care about and share the holiday. So, Landon, do you have any big holiday plans with your family?
We actually don't. This is going to be our second year moved into Idaho. So we're still kind of, you could say, beginning the journey of creating the traditions local to Idaho and what we do in the wintertime. Do we snowboard? Do we ski? Do we go tubing? Is there a favorite place we go hang out during the wintertime? When does it start snowing? When can we rely on that? So all of these things are still kind of up and in the air for us. And as you know, Sam, when you have greater than just a few kids, planning those things actually matters. And so I'm not quite sure. I guess what I would say is we have plans to have a plan, and we're planning on making that plan to make a plan very soon.
Okay, well, it sounds like you have a plan then. That's fantastic. I know that's like kind of the fun part, right? Especially with your kids when they're younger, you got to get to create your own traditions and you get to blend, different sides of the family and what you guys did growing up, and then together making your own version of those things. I think that's pretty fun.
And one of the things I would say, I don't know if you've noticed this, Sam. I had traditions growing up with my family when I was a child. I find it almost impossible to replicate the traditions that I had as a child with my own children. It's almost as if there's some mysterious force that forces you to create your own traditions with your own kids.
Well, it's like when you go back to your childhood home growing up and you're like, wow, this house is a lot smaller than I remembered in my head. It's a lot different, right?
Right.
Yeah. Well, Landon, we have a lot to talk about today. There are some very interesting things happening in the world of cybersecurity. So let's get into it as we mind the headlines. And Landon, the first one that I'm going to bring up is a conversation that I know you and I have had a couple different times around software and how hard it is to get software right. And then when you don't get it right, you got to roll it back. I know every single person in information technology and security has had to deal with the software rollback to a stable version, whatever that stable version is. But here's a story. Airbus, the airplane manufacturer, had an issue in some version of their software they found, and it caused a flight. I'm just going to say it here. October 30th, flight 1231, operated by U.S. airline JetBlue, made an unplanned diversion to Florida's Tampa International Airport, interrupting its journey from Cancun to Newark. According to the FAA, the crew experienced a flight control issue, and other reports, CNN especially, saying the plane experienced a sudden drop in altitude that caused injuries to about 15 or maybe 20 different passengers. It's a lot of risk to be held within one software release. Landon, what do you make of this story?
Yeah, I think it highlights what we're all thinking, which is the more software driven our world becomes, the higher propensity for these types of things to happen. I would say though, being a devil's advocate to that opinion, is that we've been in a software driven world for 20 years now, and this isn't the first time something like this has happened. And it reminds me of the time that I spent at Tanium back in the day. There was a lot of times with our customers where we were trying to reinvent how they deployed software, how they managed and upgraded software, and how they managed operating system patching at scale. And one of the things that we noticed very quick was that we cannot conduct this process at scale unless we can also roll back at scale. And at that time, we're talking, Sam, only like maybe just less than a decade ago, there wasn't a reliable way to roll back software, right? And so a lot of the conversations we ended up having with our customers was, hey, don't bring this capability in the door unless you can also walk that software patch back as easily as you can push it. And I thought that that was, an interesting way. Now we're seeing people like Ninja One and other companies really define what software management looks like on the endpoint. Unfortunately, when we look at something like this is one of those physical components that has software on it that needs actual hands-on keyboard attention, right? And so,
Right.
and I think in addition to that, it also has more physical, deathly consequences for multiple people rather than just blue screening a box at the same time.
That's right. Your network goes down. You're going to get a lot of complaint tickets. You're going to get the business leaders barking at you, wondering why the revenue
Mhm.
has stopped. But if a plane loses the ability to control its altitude and position and pitch and all the things in flight, now we're dealing with hundreds and hundreds of lives in a physical way. And also, I found interesting in this, it seemed like it was a data corruption issue from the solar activity. We had a big, massive solar active period that produced
Mhm.
a lot of different stuff. And I saw the northern lights here where I live. I don't know if you did, if you were maybe in the northern latitudes. It was beautiful, but it was that data corruption, I think, is what caused this software to have misinterpretation of some data and then cause that
Yeah.
downward dive.
It's interesting. This is not the first time this has happened. It's not the first time it's happened on the ground, and it's not the first time it's happened in the air. There's a fantastic YouTube video on this that kind of goes through what happens when some of these particles from the sun and from outer space actually impact a motherboard, and what happens to the bits and the bytes on the motherboard, and how we've built our kind of our hardware to be resilient to this. And airplanes were a really good example where I think this almost exact incident happened, man, had it been 10, 15 years ago. And there's another case of someone playing a video game. I think it was actually Mario or maybe it was Zelda. And they ended up getting teleported to the end of the level because of the same issue, right? And what happens is these particles end up hitting the motherboard at the perfect, at 1 trillionth of a chance, hit this portion of the motherboard where it flips a bit from 1 to 0, and that
Yeah.
one single change impacts everything that's running on that hardware, and that's what's going on in software at the hardware level. So this isn't the first time it's happened. It's very interesting to me, the growth that we're going to have to continue to put into aviation hardware equipment, more than we already have. And so I'm really interested to see what the follow-on studies are in terms of how do we continue hardening hardware equipment to this type of interference from the sun, especially as they go up in altitude and are more susceptible to
Right.
it.
Well, and I think too, we had it happen the other day. We had a power outage here locally. We had a big squall come through, and it hit suddenly, and all of a sudden we lost power in the home. I was in the middle of
Mhm.
a big Zoom. I think Landon, you were on that Zoom with me, and we had to. I was bricked basically. I had no internet to my
Yeah.
house, and I pulled out a pad and paper, and I pulled out a pen, and I started writing notes, and going back to the Stone Age, if you will. But
Yeah.
the reality is the more we rely on software as a service, the more we rely on, software in general to perform our modern work, the more at risk we are from, I mean, just physical events outside of our control. There's no way you can plan or control solar flares. It's just
Right.
a natural phenomenon and a reality. And who knows? So being having those business processes ready to go for these acts of nature, if you will.
Yep. Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
All right, something else that's near and dear to us. I was looking at this, interesting. So GitLab, which is a repository, one of the big three repositories between, GitHub, Bitbucket, GitLab. This is some reporting from a organization called Truffle Security, and they are using the Truffle Hog thing, and they were scanning these public repositories for active cloud secrets or cloud logins and cloud, basic ways to get in. So the headline, scanning 5.6 million public GitLab repositories for secrets, and they found 17,000 verified live secrets. And of course, they earned a couple of dollars in bug bounty along the way, as they should. So Landon, why don't you explain GitLab to us? Why are secrets included in these repositories, and what's the risk here?
Yeah, what I would say is there's nothing special about GitLab. There's nothing special about GitHub or any other kind of repository or CI/CD program, or sorry, like hosting provider that causes them to have more secrets than another. It's really just comes down back to the foundational issue of developers and engineers and people that are developing scripts. I don't know if you've developed or even very quickly vibe coded something where you need your
Yeah,
OpenAI API key, or you need
right.
your GitLab key, or your GitHub credentials, or even your AWS key to authenticate to do some kind of automation in the cloud. It is so much easier to just put that hard coded in your script rather than or in an environment file. And so I think it really highlights how pervasive this problem is one, how easy it makes developers' lives and where technology can probably help in that regard, such as like vaulting accounts and vaulting secrets. But I think it just shows the problem that we all have, which is laziness ultimately at the end of the
Mm.
day, right? It's the laziness that we have as engineers where we want to get things done very quickly because I think the majority of engineers are lazy, which makes them work very efficiently. And then these things get accidentally synced or accidentally pushed to live public repositories. And so there's kind of a two-faceted laziness. One is, why is our repository public? And two, why are we not ensuring that we have good CI/CD practices to do static code analysis, to ensure that we don't have secrets in the first place? Now, I do find it interesting that there are so many, today, I would say, there are so many open source technologies that allow organizations to go and scan their own, or like in this case, other people's public repositories for secrets. And if you think that attackers aren't doing this every day, I mean, think of what we might talk about a little bit later, Samuel,
Mhm.
is if you think of SolarWinds just a little bit and how the compromise was at the base supply chain level, at the code base, um, the propensity for attackers to do this in a public repo with public secrets and slowly gain access and poison your application in ways that you can't see immediately. I mean, this is a problem that I think organizations should take a little bit more seriously. And there's plenty of free tools for them to be able to actually start addressing and surfacing this problem. And I think that's one of the biggest areas of encouragement that I would give organizations is there's no tool, there's no CI/CD, there's no SCA solution out there that's going to solve this problem for you.
Right.
But to get a head start on this problem, there's a lot of free resources you can go use that can help really well, such as Truffle Hog as an example.
Well, and I think this is an example of like these are the basics, like the real foundational like steps to secure application development, and the life cycle of it is
Mhm.
don't hard code your access keys or your secrets into something that is not publicly available. So he goes through the different ways that they went about it, how he did some scanning and discovery, and then the automation he wrote in the scripting. And you can absolutely dive into this and understand a little bit more. But it looks like uh, as far as public repos scanned, he did do Bitbucket around 2.6 million, and GitLab found 5.6 public repos, and then a whole bunch of secrets that were found. And I think most interesting as well, the secrets exposed by Typegraph here. It looks like the Google Cloud Platform secrets were the
Mhm.
most available in what they found. MongoDB there, Telegram, bot token, OpenAI, OpenWeather. Oh boy, that's interesting. AWS a little further down there. The stuff you would expect for sure that you see on this list, but GCP running away with the number of secrets exposed. Do you think there's anything in GCP, or is this just a law of small numbers? What do we got going on here?
I think it's really just the growth that GCP has had over the years when it comes to automation and microservices and queued services and all of these different pieces of infrastructure that we can use outside of the Google Cloud Platform to host applications. I think the Google Vertex platform has certainly seen a tremendous amount of growth. It's very, very extensible. I think it's easier to use than AWS. It's easier to use than even Azure today, where those two companies have kind of shifted to you're an enterprise customer and you're all in with us, or you're nobody. And GCP, I think, has remained a little bit more independent while also hosting very, very big customers and staying on the cusp of innovation. So I really don't think it's anything specific about GCP or a fault of GCP, other than its popularity for very quick homebrewed automation applications that engineers are making.
Gotcha. So they're just trying out a minimum viable thing or idea, and just using GCP to do that development on.
Yeah,
Makes
that
a
would
lot
be
of
my
sense.
guess. Yeah.
Nice. All right. And then the last story, this one I found just absolutely fascinating. We all remember from a few years ago the solar winds, the sunburst attack. And what happened as a result of it was there were actual charges brought up against Tim Brown, the security officer at Solar Winds. And I remember the conversation, security leaders saying, wow, my job is very hard already. And now, on top of all that, I have to worry about criminal and legal issues from my job performance, not just getting fired, or not just,
Mhm.
whatever that is. That's a risk for all of us in any job. But now I have to worry about criminal issues. But it seems like this case has been now dismissed by the Securities and Exchange Commission. Landon, what do you make of this whole thing?
Yeah, I think probably the most boring response, but the most heartfelt one at the same time is I find it very interesting.
Yeah.
On one hand, I think that it's about time we saw some progress in this case, whether it be convicting Tim Brown or whether it be finding a solution otherwise. Um, I think what it does for me is it begs the question: is how responsible is the CISO for the real world effects of cybersecurity failures? And I think this question isn't well answered anywhere in the world, and
Right.
especially not in America today. I mean, you look at SolarWinds, for example. When SolarWinds happened, the current role that I was working both part-time and full-time was in the intelligence community.
Hmm.
And this caused one of the biggest disruptions to our daily life. And the agencies that I was contracting work with, that I had ever seen. And this made severe this had severe repercussions for intelligence officers in the field, for case officers working cases, for targeting officials actually doing operations globally. This had a very, very big impact on everybody's safety, not just from a cyber perspective,
Hmm.
but from people's lives perspective. And so when you look at the severity and the gravity of just this specific event, you think, man, hey, someone's got to be accountable for that, right? At the same time, a CISO is one person. And a
Hmm.
CISO is one person that is dominated by probably more attack vectors than any other position, including, I would say, wealth fund or, hedge manager, financial analysts, right? Like this, like the CISO position is becoming a very dangerous position to be in. And
Right.
so I think I'm straddled between the two things, Sam, is I think there is a level of accountability for CISOs when they take on that position, the fame that comes with being a CISO, the responsibility that comes with being a CISO. If you want those things, there needs to be accountability for you doing your job and doing it well. At the same time, I'm not sure that that responsibility and accountability amounts to you serving prison time should a breach happen. So I'm kind of torn on this subject.
Well, I think it's an issue of negligence when it comes down to it. And how is that defined? I mean, that's far
Mhm.
beyond my pay grade, and lawyers and the judicial system would have to figure that all out. But it comes down
Mhm.
to, you know, according to best practices, and are you being proactive or are you being negligent? All of these things I think would be contributing parts to this conversation. And
Mhm.
I know if I don't do my job well, I just lose it. Like, I don't have a risk of any, criminal, unless I'm doing specific criminal activity in a negligent way. And,
Mhm.
so there is some liability to that as long as I'm not breaking the law as it's defined. But at the same
Mhm.
time, security is such a rapidly evolving space. How do you keep up with best practices so that you are not negligent or not culpable, I think would be the word, in something bad happening to your organization?
Yeah, I think it screams to me almost as if it's an impossible problem. Because if we just think through the chain of custody, if you will, for a lack of a much better term,
Yeah.
should the CISO be responsible? Well, the CISO can't be ultimately responsible for everyone else doing their jobs like they are in the military, right? When we see a military commander getting fired for the actions of a private in the field for something that they did, that seems appropriate because that's the military and people's lives
Hmm.
are at stake. And we pour almost $1 trillion a year into supporting that structure of our country. This is
And
much
also,
different,
like,
right?
those officers understand that that is a risk, and that is an outcome, that if their chain of command doesn't execute or deliver or whatever that outcome is in a negative way,
Right.
they understand that that's an outcome that could happen to them.
Right, and they also take an oath
Yeah.
to be accountable for that as well. And the CISO, I mean, this is an entirely different thing that fits more into how we run as an economy. And so when you ask, like, should a CISO be responsible? I'm not sure they can be responsible. So do you shift responsibility to the team leads that oversee application security and data
Hmm.
security
Hmm.
and all of the other securities? Well, that doesn't really make much sense either, because at that point, legally, I don't think you can keep them liable. But two, no one's going to work in security anymore, and so it becomes this problem. I think you're right, Sam, of negligence, and I think the area where we may see some settling of this, some area where we may see companies get a more tight focus on this and be content in the short term, is really the cyber insurance companies, right? I think
Hmm.
we know that ever since the dawn of time, there are more and more breaches per year. And there are more and more different ways that those breaches can either be automated or scaled or targeted or impact different systems also per year. And I think one of the things that we saw when cyber insurance came out was they said, "Hey, we'll just jack up the premiums," right?
Right.
Well, if that's the other curve is true, and it is an exponential curve of breaches happening per year, cyber insurance companies are going to demand more, right?
Right.
Especially for these enterprise companies, or cyber insurance is going to go away. They can't live together alongside each other, and so I think that we may see more demanding SEC driven laws and regulations for cyber insurance companies to have to answer um, for the clients that they have. Of, are their clients, do they have a propensity to be breached, or what are the
Hmm.
responsibilities and
Hmm.
accountabilities that they actually have? And that's a very, very large assumption, but I think it has a natural, we have a potential to naturally drift in that direction, because each one of these breaches and each one of these payouts that a cyber insurance company has to make has an impact on the economy. And the
Right.
bigger and bigger these enterprises become, the more it starts to look like a housing market crash, and the more it starts to look like, a bank having to go under and the government having to bail it out. And those are wild, massive assumptions with massive gravity to them. But I wouldn't be surprised if we start heading in that direction.
Well, I think it's going to be an interesting conversation for the whole industry as a whole of where does your responsibility start and stop as a cybersecurity leader? What are you liable for, either civilly, criminally, across a wide spectrum of things? How do you then mitigate that risk, whether it's insurance, whether it's, gosh, whatever it is, people, process, technology, the basic stuff. But I think this case initially was kind of shot across the bow from the SEC to corporate America, and especially for how impactful to the federal government, as you mentioned earlier, the SolarWinds breach was. It's almost like you guys can't mess with us. This is very critical.
Mhm.
We have to have this stuff right in the supply chain. And so shot across the bow, I would expect that there will be more cases that the SEC brings against notable and impactful cybersecurity incidents. Maybe they'll have their arguments better, more sewn up, better directed, more effective into the legal system. So I think, yeah, as a security leader, you can breathe a sigh of relief. Yeah, Tim Brown has been the charges dropped. That's great, but at the same time, I don't think that reality's gone away. I do think that the SEC may come for their pound of flesh if something bad does happen.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, let's move on to something a little bit more lighthearted. Landon, sometimes in cybersecurity, you just have to laugh. There are things that happen, and there are, it's just really funny. So, Landon, I have some cybersecurity memes that I want to show you, and I'm going to get your reaction to them. I'm going to show you 3 different memes. I want to hear your opinion on them, what you think, and then at the end, you're going to pick a winner. That meme creator will get no prize because I don't know who they are. I just found these randomly on the internet. But if you want to claim that this meme was your creation and you can prove it, I'll send you a gift card. Whatever, but not a big deal. But Landon, we're going to pick our best. There's going to be some non-existent prize, but let's get into some cybersecurity memes. And I'm going to show you the first one here as we pull it up.
I can see it. This meme is actually really interesting, because I've seen this meme before. It made me laugh really, really hard. I think it's a perfect meme. The one thing that's really interesting is there's a block there at the bottom,
Yeah.
or on the right side where it says unpaid open source developers, right?
Yeah.
There is a library, and yeah, for everyone that's a developer, they'll know what I'm talking about, and I'll sound like a doofus for not knowing it off the top of my head. There's a library somewhere where we don't know why there's a specific unused function or something in it, and every time we try to remove it, it breaks the entire every library that's above it, which is almost everything. It's React, it's Webpack, it's everything. And so we just leave it. And it's from like 20 years ago and we don't touch it and nobody talks about it. But this meme was originally created to support that kind of that thing. But I think this is even more accurate when we think of all of the different technologies stacked on top of each other
Yeah.
in Cloudflare. I think if I had to give this like a 0 out of 10, I would give it like a 7.5.
7.5. That's excellent. Okay, that's a good start there. I think my favorite is the red angry bird flying through the air. The whatever Microsoft is doing.
Yeah. Or the shark chewing on the undersea cable.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
That's a picture of my son, Samuel.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. All right, let's go to the next one here. So we're going to do cyber meme number 2, as if I can pull it up here. This is a blast from the past, Landon.
Yes. Yeah. This is actually, I haven't thought about this in so long, is the beeping and the buzzing that would come before the call hit your phone. And
That's right.
it was also there when you'd get a text message, like you knew a text message was coming in at the same time when we were only using cellular for texting.
That's right.
Yeah, this is hilarious. I love this. This speaks back to my childhood. Unfortunately, I feel like I'm probably the last generation that'll ever understand this.
Yeah.
And my kids would not think this is funny at all. So that, to me, that makes it a 9 out of 10 immediately.
I know. Yeah, your computer speakers are telling the future that you have a phone call coming in because the random, blip, blip, blip,
Yeah.
blip, and whatever.
Yeah, I
music
wonder
you
if
were
this relates to Airbus at all, and what they heard.
That was the sound. That was the sound the pilots heard before all of a sudden the autopilot took their plane on a joyride. Oh my gosh. Okay, let's do this third one here. So okay, we got a 7.5 so far. We've got a 9 now. Let's see if I can top it with cyber meme number 3. Landon, what do you think of this one?
I love that. It's funny, I haven't actually seen this movie, but I've seen clips from it.
Yeah.
Black Friday suspicious emails. And this is a never-ending problem. I think it's true. I think it's a little lower effort than the rest of the other memes.
Yeah.
So I'll give it a 7.
Okay.
But still hilarious. My kids would love
That's
this.
funny.
They wouldn't understand it, but
Yeah.
they'd love it.
And I know the Mario movie was a favorite in our household. They have another Mario movie coming out soon, next year, I
Oh,
think, at some point, which we're
I gotta
very much
catch up.
looking forward to. But yeah, haven't we all felt like Toad in that IT support role? Like, no, not that one.
Right,
Whether it's
right.
with your
We
family or
it's
an end user, whoever it is.
mostly with my family, but I do find it funny that the IT keeps telling people not to touch things, but IT gives people the privileges to touch things in the first place. It's just, shooting back at IT. It's like figure out what you want from your people, IT.
That's right. That's right. Well, let's see. So that means our winner is going to be the cyber meme number 2, the future predicting computer speakers. I agree with you, Landon. My kids would have no idea what those are. In fact, you see them at thrift stores pretty regularly now, and they're still on the shelf week after week whenever you stop in.
Yep, I think the
So
other question my kids would have is why are there two knobs and not just one?
exactly right. Exactly right. All right. Well, Landon, that's going to bring us to our next segment here today, and we're going to talk about what matters now. And Landon, I think this conversation about responsibility and the line, we were talking about it from the users who should be responsible to not click on suspicious links. And obviously invests a
Mhm.
lot in phishing awareness training and email safety and all that kind of stuff. As a security leader, being responsible for the effective and diligent application of security controls to protect and secure your company's organizational data. But we reviewed that news story. There are millions of GitLab repos that have active cloud secrets that are just publicly available. And some, it didn't look like very hard, scripting work that anyone that knows a little bit about it could probably do would be able to find. So what matters now, I think, is this line of responsibility. And as much as we want maybe to shift it to somebody else, and where does it start with us? Where does it end? And I'm curious your thoughts on all that.
Yeah, I think I said it before. I do believe it. I'll say it again. I think it's an impossible problem to solve in the short term until the government gets overly involved. Because one person just can't bear the legal responsibility for a distributed, multi-country slash international cyber surface, right? They just can't. It's impossible. Not one person can enact. There's not enough hours in the day for a person to enact enough change or enough leadership for all of the vulnerabilities to go away. And so I think for me, I think one of the and I don't know how to measure this, and it may not even be a good measure at all, is your ability to act quickly and swiftly,
Mm,
and answer questions efficiently. Like one of the areas of the SEC, I think one of the better things the SEC did was the ability for or the requirement they put on organizations to be able to determine that there was a breach and impact and be able to report on materiality of that breach within 4 days. I think
right.
that was a step in the right direction because what it did is it did not tell organizations you can't be breached and you'll go to jail if you're breached. It told organizations when you're breached, you better be able to tell us and your consumers how much you've been breached and what the extent of that breach really is. And I think that is really in my opinion, the measure and the grading factor in which I would put against a CISO is can an insurance company, can the government, can someone walk into an organization and ask really hard questions and be able to get those answers back with some level of efficiency or swiftness? Um, and I think that's probably what CISOs ought to focus on as well. I think that's what they should focus their internal processes around. That's what they should focus their internal people and the architecture of
Mhm.
how they place their people internally. I think it's also how they should focus on selecting the tools that they do end up wanting to invest in is do those things amount to our ability to either respond or answer questions very, very quickly? Because if we can do those two things, we can always enact a better environment, a better posture, a better security standard within the organization. And we can also answer the question and protect against breaches very rapidly. But what we can't promise is that we'll never be breached.
Right.
And so I think, that's the measure and the grading scale in which I would put against a CISO rather than, if you're breached, you're going to jail, which is probably going to happen to every CISO.
Yeah, getting breached, it is unfortunately a reality. I mean, that's the old joke, right? There are two types of companies, those that have been breached and those that don't know it yet. And unfortunately, as a security leader, you're living in that world where whatever email, alert, text message that you get could be the one that tells you about some very critical thing happening, and you have to enact that response plan. So it's almost like, we joke about firefighting a lot. We don't want to always be firefighting, but at the same time, like
Right.
having the ability to respond quickly to an emergency and effectively deal with that is probably, are there building codes to prevent fire from spreading rapidly? Are there certain, legal things that have to happen in order to keep our people and houses safe and all that kind of stuff? Yes, absolutely. But at the same time, I'm still very grateful there's a fire department spot near my house. And if something bad happens, they'll be here within 5 minutes, and we'll have trained professionals ready to assist my family, me, my property,
Right.
people I care about. Maybe that's a model we should start thinking about more, instead of we will just never have a bad thing happen. That's a pipe dream, not real. Not real.
Right.
Instead, how are we going to recover quickly, respond fast, and effectively deal with
Mhm.
whatever it is we're facing?
Yeah, I think the other challenge we have to give a break to CISOs and security professionals alike, is the vendor ecosystem has not been kind in
Yeah,
this regard. They have not,
yeah,
I think every vendor wants to say we will reduce your mean time to respond, or your mean time to recover, or your mean time to detect by 1 billion%, right? Which makes no sense statistically to
yeah,
begin with. But these are all over every marketing slogan we see, right? The reality is there's maybe some truth in that statement, but only if you pump all of your logs to this
hmm
centralized
hmm
SIM, only if you pump all of your alerts to this one specific place. And so the trade-off that I think the rather selfish vendor community has kind of given to the CISO community and just the security professional community is, we can answer questions quickly if we want to spend billions of dollars or millions of dollars to achieve that functionality. And I think that is probably where CISOs are at the biggest disadvantage, is they don't control the ecosystem or the economy in
right.
which they buy the tool that gives them the ability to speak quickly. And the cloud providers certainly haven't helped in this very much either. And so the CISO is kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place a little bit. And that's why I think, back to what we've kind of agreed on, is I don't think you can send them to jail unless there's
Yeah.
extreme negligence in the hand, right?
If they're laundering money, we've got established precedent in that legally. Like, they should go to jail, whatever
Right.
criminal charge should happen there. If they're doing their best in a security incident, according to their best judgment and professional experience, maybe there should be a little more mitigating circumstances applied to that. So,
Right. Yep, because I think then my last thought here, and then we'll
yeah,
close out, is I think the challenge the CISO could make to the rest of the organization is, well, no one approved my budget to be able to go and buy the solutions for us to be able to do the things, and I have a written transcript of me being able to do this. So now, is the CEO going to jail? Is the board of directors going to jail? Right?
right.
Are the investors above them going to jail? It becomes an impossible question to ask, and it ends up. And I think we're seeing it. The SEC example with Tim Brown is a good example of, things will just get stuck in court and then eventually come to a resolution, right?
Yeah.
To no actual effective change.
Yeah. Well, I think that brings us to our last thing. It's the last part of our show today. It's, what did you learn today? What I learned today is you can only be responsible for yourself, and you can only control the things that you can directly control. So whether that's getting your Christmas lights up or paying somebody else to do it, or whether that's keeping your cloud secrets from being exposed publicly, or even, doing your best with the resources that you have in a way that you can feel comfortable at night, putting your head on the pillow saying, I have done my best and I've been responsible for what I can be responsible for. I think if we have that approach, maybe the world gets a little bit better.
Yeah, I think I'd have to agree with you almost full heartedly. I was going to mirror exactly what you said, in the fact that I think what we can take away from this is that we should always be ready. We should always be prepared. Organizations should be ready to act and ready to answer questions, and that should be our primary focus. Because if we're doing those things, then things are protected by default. And I think in my personal life, I think do our best to replicate the traditions maybe we had as kids, but I think we're
Yeah.
probably more responsible in creating new ones. And that's maybe where I'll spend some of my time this evening.
That's right. Your kids will not remember the traditions that your parents established. They will remember the ones you established with them. And that's a beautiful thing
It's
to
a
pass
great
on.
quote.
Yeah.
Yep.
Landon, thank you very much for the time today. My name is Samuel Hill, and that's all for now.